voice.
There we go.
On the agenda. Behaviours.
Share. Good.
You can hide the little doodacky down the bottom as well.
Careful.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Right, councillors, an afternoon of adaptation and perseverance, but that's what we're about, isn't it? And on a day of funerals. So, right, let's get into it. We have, particularly Kendall, have undertaken due engagement work for the Featherston Masterplan, which spreads across this year and into the early part of next year. And we've had some good interactions, a high rate of interaction actually. So our mission in this workshop is to give you feedback as to the nature of what we heard, different elements, which was good. Very informed elements and encouragements back to us for consideration of different topics, which we will share with you and which we have to factor into our finer planning aspects as we take the master plan forward. So a bit of a basic intro. The other component is the purpose of why we're having the workshop, to get a signal back from you as councillors of the direction we need to head in landing on a preferred options direction for as we compile the master plan further and work towards shaping up the actual draft master plan. So for your digestion of the information and then to give us feedback and your comments on direction so we can undertake further work. That's about all I have to say, and with the way I'll just take you through the agenda. So we're a bit behind time, but we will catch up a bit, I think. Next session is, I'll just inform you of the agenda, and then Kent's going to start on a high-level overview of the consultation today that we received. So the agenda is, next part is concept options 1 and 2. Recalling that we had concept option 1 and 2. Option 1 was development around the existing position of the train station and the main street, and the challenge of revitalising the main street. Option 2 was the prospect, the bolder option of relocating the train station to the main street, and as a more innovative but cost-orientated solution. And to hear the feedback and have discussion on that. We'll also make time with Ree to talk about the vision statement that's embodied in the master plan, and that's the vision statement based around not what we've just written, but what we've heard from the community about what Featherston is and should be about. And then the next part is Kendall taking you through the themes from the submissions, and she will break it down in terms of the responses received from the 11 questions. And then the ending component is the process from here. What are our next steps to shape, as we work, as officers work with consultants to shape up a draft master plan. So we'll cover that off in the end. But next bit is a high-level synopsis by Kendall of the consultation process.
Sorry. I'm really keen to hear how the progress has gone, and I'm really excited about the work that's been done. However, are you going to repeat this process in a new train? We're five weeks out from the election. We've worked through this all the way through, but a new council on board will need to be brought up to speed. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you said that you were seeking some direction from council today, or councillors today, about the next steps. So I guess I worry a little bit about that, is that, 5 weeks out from an election, we're giving you some guidance on our next process. I just would quite like some feedback on whether you feel that that's appropriate, given the time. So
we have to present finer grain elements of acting upon the feedback we've received from the mixed members of the community, and to do the finer elements. At the moment, it's only 2 high-level options with some reference to potential densities. We've got to absorb all the consultation components, shape that up and bring it back to council, and that will be happening on 21st of September. And the other component in terms of time is in terms of the draft master plan reporting to council in November. So that will be after the elections.
Yeah. I think as well, Colin, you need to, we're dealing on consultation and interpretation as opposed to our councillors' opinion.
No,
and also, I think it's very much BAU, but certainly any new council who is uncomfortable about the direction of the previous council can certainly stop and restart. So I think we just got to carry on. There's a 3-month lag between inductions and upskilling before, and then you've got Christmas.
No, I agree. It's just unfortunate it falls right in the middle of an election cycle. So
lots of things are.
I know.
So I just reiterate that from a governance perspective, it's BAU.
Yeah.
There's no decisions. This isn't a decision-making meeting. This is a workshop. So it's about FYI, keeping you up to the loop. We know we are going to have potentially some councillors carry over, and we're hoping that with the ones that do end up being re-elected, that we can have a bit of a bridging of helping tell the story of where this has come from.
Great, thanks.
And then there'll be work with these guys to have to do that as well.
Excellent.
And thanks, Amanda. And there's also the duty of officers to cover off topics that are rolling forward as within the body of council work as part of new councillors' induction.
No, that's absolutely right. And thank you for that. No, that's great.
So, can I just ask, are there other councillors on Zoom watching this, or are we the sum total?
You're it today. We're recording it.
Yeah.
Ree and Richard, unfortunately, able to Zoom in either. So we'll record it today. Any questions of them as well, we'll record and we can communicate after when we see this. The other councillors as well.
It's a bit disappointing.
Yeah.
But some apologies for some. Like Garrett, was really wanted to be here for this, but couldn't be. So
I think there are a couple of people sick as well.
Yeah. So as long as we can make sure that it's distributed, and we, via me possibly, that I actually request that they do provide feedback as opposed to just ignore it, and then we get a bit of confidence that what we decided, or not deciding, but what we're hearing today is the other councillors have feedback. Cool.
Sorry, Kendall.
That's okay. Yeah. Okay. So I'll run you through sort of the higher level stuff to begin with, which is the options and the consultation. So the consultation is just informal at this stage. It wasn't formal consultation, so we went out really just for feedback, what people wanted to see, so that we can get an idea of option 1, option 2, what we can build into the actual master plan itself. So we went out on the 22nd of July and it was open until the 19th of August. We put an online survey through SurveyMonkey out for that time, also did hard copies in the libraries and everywhere else. From that, we had 154 total survey responses, which is quite a lot. I was quite happy getting that level. 13 were from businesses and organisations based in Featherston, some that were elsewhere in the district looking at potentially opening up in Featherston, and 141 from local residents. We also did some drop-in sessions. So I worked from the library for 3 days, 2 on a Wednesday and 1 on a Saturday, and that was really valuable. I had so many people come in, had a great chat for, I think, the minimum time someone was there was about an hour. So it was really, really enjoyable. We also did 2 evening drop-ins, Russell and I, and that was really valuable too. We had 2 groups of people who stayed for the whole hour and a half, and that was more of an open discussion. So all of that's been recorded in this post-survey, the drop-in sessions, and just feedback on the phones have all been incorporated into this. But the stats you'll see, that's just mainly the survey responses. And also we captured demographics as part of that, and that's to understand what different groups of people want and what they need from Featherston. So the most we had was from people in the age group 45 to 64, there was 59 people, 56 people 31 to 44, 22 people 65 plus, and only 9 between 18 and 30. Unfortunately, we didn't get anyone under 18. And in the past, when we did set up the spatial plan, Russell and I went to Community College and had a discussion there. So I think that's something we could do again to get their views going forward. Yeah, a total of 186 people formally reached, which I think has really helped frame that, and that's really going to help the level of detail going into actually forming the master plan for Featherston.
If you take the 2 evening drop-in session as an example of the type of discussion, people were offering up ideas at the high level in terms of the 2 options, generally high level stuff, and also reminding us of the constraints of the town, and also identifying specific matters that might activate the town more, and including things like greater decentralisation around the town. So it was a great deal of passion and open discussion.
I'm really interested in the demographics, because that 45 to 64 and the 31 to 44 age group, you know, that's a significant change, and probably in the last 10 years in Featherston. So that's really interesting.
Can we say that of the 30, how many of the 13 business or organisations could we say represent more than one person? I'm trying to get a sample size and a margin per year out of this.
Out of the businesses we had, I don't have a list. Most of them were reasonable sized businesses. Some were smaller scale, but some were larger based.
It might be just the business, i.e. one entity, as opposed to the opinion of the entire people employed by this.
Yeah, so most were by the person in charge of the business. We did have one business that did have 3 different submissions under that one business. So that was quite interesting. So there was a bit. Yeah.
More than I think the margin per year on this is about 7% either way. Just done a quick calculation, so that's actually not too bad. It'd be lovely if we had more. It really would. Do you think you've maxed them out?
Number of submissions?
Yeah.
I potentially could have had some more, but I'm pretty happy with that level. I think that for Featherston, when we did the spatial plan, we didn't get a lot of submissions from Featherston as we would have liked. Other towns are probably a bit more able to submit. So I was pretty happy with that, and a wonderful range of ideas, as we said, as well. So,
great.
So yeah, the options, just as a bit of background, they were presented very high level options, really concept options to see what people thought and direct into the final master plan. A bit of background, which we worked on, was we knew the Main Street needed a bit of development. We know people use the train and there's a commuter town. We know that there is an estimated population projection of 1,700 people over 30 years. So this comes down to about 940 dwellings. To put that into perspective, last year we had 26 new building consents. A few years before that we were receiving about 5 per year. So it has increased, and what we're seeing is now people are developing these sites which were larger and could be really well developed, but now they're doing into the current rules, and if we don't get ahead of it now, there'll be no available land left to develop.
Do you feel that projection is still relevant in a different political environment where we're seeing people moving from larger centres post-COVID, and we're seeing a lot of push from government to force councils to open up land? Do we think that 1,700, I think we raised this right at the spatial plan.
That's right.
This is lowballing it. I understand we don't know what's going to be around in 5 years.
Yeah, so when we did the spatial plan, the number was 800 over that 30 years, so it's gone up quite significantly from then. We did take a medium projection, but that is still something. If they're only projections, it could definitely be more or less, and they do really change things, but I think definitely COVID and people moving has played a big part in that increase.
So what we're doing still fit for purpose because of a level of flexibility in it, would you say? I mean, when I've read it,
I think
that you've got the ability to change or enlarge or take the concept and make it bigger, depending on demand.
Yes, yeah.
Cool.
So just on a national scale, population predictions by CNZ and other population prediction organisations are, their margin of error is getting bigger because there's so much unknown. I was at a meeting on Monday and Tuesday where economist Bill presented on the current economic situation. Population predictions was one of the things that he touched on, and we are going to see they're predicting exit from New Zealand, particularly to Australia, over the next couple of years.
About 120,000.
Yeah, so whether or not we get impact and which regions will be impacted by that, it's very difficult.
If you use GDP as an indicator of population flow, I mean, we're seeing a massive move from Wellington at 29% lower GDP, but we've had a 3% growth. So it's an interesting thing to throw in the mix.
Yeah.
We've taken the middle ground.
But we heard when we did the spatial plan, we heard people stand up in Greytown and say, I think those numbers are low. Potentially low, we're probably going to incur a lot more growth. So there's a whole mix of views on the topic.
That's New Zealand back in 2013, 2014, we were predicting zero growth across our region. So that's how the dynamics change.
Cool. So consent numbers are backing it, and certainly the personal stories at the drop-in sessions of who's come from Wellington, who's come from the north and settled in Featherston.
But it's also a self-fulfilling prophecy. If we make more land available, then our property will, everybody will price.
I watched that movie too.
Playing your age.
Yeah.
I'm sure mine.
Okay, we're running out of time.
Okay, here we go. So the options, option one was intensification around the existing town centre and the train station, and increasing density around those areas. You'll see when I bring the map up in a sec. And option two is moving the rail station nearer the existing town centre and intensifying around both, which is more of the transport orientated development approach. So when we asked in our survey, which one of these do you support? 95 people, which is 64%, said they would prefer option one. 15 people, which is 10%, preferred option two. 33, which is 22%, said neither of the above. And only 4 people didn't know. So that's just a bit of the stats there.
I think it's been quite controversial throwing in an option on an asset that we neither own, control, or i.e. the railway station.
They've got it, Tongue's land.
And I think it did its job in as much as the 30-year plan, a dramatic change.
And I think, especially in the drop-ins and the after the evening ones, it really, as we discussed what a transport-orientated development is, I think people really thought, oh, okay, it could be this. But then we came back to, actually, it's really not that far between the train station and the town centre currently, and maybe we should improve that link instead of moving that. So that's where it sort of landed, which I think is a really good outcome.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's your option one. So just in terms of density, so we've got it up at the moment. Orange is about 200 square metres squared, which is this colour here. This colour is 300, oh, I won't touch that. Outer residential is that green colour, which is about 2,000 square metres, more of a lifestyle option. And then in the town centre, the purple there is mixed use, which would provide for things like shops, but also residential apartments. Whereas the red in the middle is a town centre zone. So that's where we'd really want to focus some commercial areas. And so from that, what you'll see there, I've grouped some of the summaries into mentions. 86 people said they like where the train station is. They think it's good connected to town. 42 mentions followed on from that, saying that it'd be actually nice if we could link the main street to the station and create a nice corridor, whether that be walking, whether that be shops. Yeah. And that was sort of where the support for option one came. I'll talk about density and the support for that after this. And yeah, again, people supported it because it was less cost than option two with moving the train station, and people thought that we could use those costs to use that money to provide the town centre and make connections. Option 2, again, just that the increased density areas a bit different and a bit larger. I think on this option you could get about 200 additional homes than the last one. So I think it was about 750 compared to 500. So we need 940. So the ones that supported this option said it could help stimulate the town centre. They saw that transport orientated development that worked elsewhere. We had a few comments where people had said we've been overseas and said it's worked well, but there was still that concern with the 2 state highways and how that could clog up the main centre.
Yeah, that state highway stuff's so much.
Yeah. So if there was a different layout, it could work quite well, is what we heard, I think, from those that supported it. But again,
pretty clear.
Yeah.
You get a pretty clear steer here.
Yeah.
And as we've been doing our work, we've been doing the engagement component online, face-to-face. We've also had follow-up discussions with Kiwi Rail in terms of operational managers from there, giving us advice, saying, well, you may not have realised, but any relocation of a train station to the main street, you don't limit your thinking, because the amount of space needed for the station may take up longer stretch than what you thought, and in which case it might pose the issue of closing off streets coming into the main street. Yeah. So there was we've learned some limiting factors, plus there's the costing work, which we asked officers of Kiwi Rail to supply.
In your conversations with Kiwi Rail, I think they've got a new CEO, so I don't know how that's changing it, but did they mention anything else about industrial hub loading along the network? We
haven't quite had that conversation not to that level just yet. We are meeting with them in October.
Yeah. It was a development topic that came in 18 months ago or 2 years ago, and was getting some impetus, and it just died away.
Yeah, there was one guy changed with the Kiwi Rail, so I've contacted them again regarding having it was specifically a log hub.
Yeah,
to stop
right,
trucks coming on the hill. Yeah. They're going over the hill. Yes. So that because there's still 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 industrial sites that could be used if they double track to allow a Wainawa style log loading facility.
Was there any discussion from anybody in the community about a subway? Effectively, a subway other than a railway station centre in the city centre of town was subway driven?
I think there's maybe 1 or 2. Yeah, brief mention of that. We did have actually a few mentions of possible, say if there was in the future, like a 2-carriage train that did go up further the line, just went through our towns, that maybe that could stop somewhere in town, and that would be quite nice.
Yeah, sure.
Or further to the south, but the long trains just weren't supported there. Yeah.
Can we turn the temperature up?
Oh, sorry, I turned it down.
I'm starting to get cold too.
Yeah, so
What's got stuff in here before?
And
admit all.
Admit all. There you go.
Make sure that it was working. This is the 24th of August.
Yeah, closing that.
Yeah,
Oh, brilliant. Sorry to interrupt.
That's okay. Oh. Go back to okay, here we go.
Cool. That's good. I'm feeling warm already.
Yeah, I'm quite warm.
So that was option 2.
Yeah. So the ones that fell into the don't support either or don't know, a lot of that came down to wanting adjustments to both options, so not wholly supporting one or the other, and that was mainly mentions of a corridor between the station and the main street, pedestrianisation of the town or a surrounding street, shops near the station, reducing density in areas or increasing it in others, including additional greenfield areas around town, avoiding flood areas, and a medium density area further to the south. Just moving that slightly down. And in terms of density, which we also asked, because that goes hand in hand with the options, 69% of people supported increasing density. So that was your 200 metres squared and your 300,
Yep.
300 being your general. And that was mainly for greater opportunity for local people. I heard throughout a lot of submissions that older people don't have options. They have older houses that aren't catering for their needs. They also, if they have to move out of town a lot of times, and people wanted to see options for them. Again, we saw people who were commuting, or younger people can't find affordable houses now, or they don't want a larger section to maintain. They would want something smaller. We also heard that there is a lot of hidden homelessness in Featherston, and that there was some need for social housing there, and request for us to talk to Kailora, which we have been doing. So that came through quite strongly, a lot of submissions. There were people who did not agree for, like, say, if they had a family, they thought for themselves they may not like that, but then thought about the community and thought what they needed. So that was really nice to see. They thought that it would provide additional support for the community and the economy, so more people with greater density will help businesses. If done right, they would support it, and that would be, you'd need better reserves and a good development, so you'd need design.
So interesting, the 23 mentions of more reserves, so more parklands within the densification areas. So we've got to be very careful of that, don't we?
Yeah, and if we didn't have more, they said that they'd like to be better used, so better utilised. So like Cherry Tree Park was mentioned quite a bit, saying that potentially that could be used better. So we didn't have more than utilise what we have.
So just in terms of linking this with their Wairarapa Combined District Plan, if we went down to a 200 or 300 square metre infill section, that would need a plan change, would it not? Or is that part of the process at the moment?
So densities will be the prospect of higher densities is factored into the district plan. You've got a 500 square metre average, not standard 400, but an average of 500 for any residential development in the district plan as it is at the moment. That's going down to 350.
The lot size will go down to 350.
So you go 200, but with an average of 350.
Down, rather than the average being 500, it will be going down to around 350.
So you could have two 200s and a 600, and that would then satisfy the district plan.
Yes. Yeah, cool.
So the minimum lot size will go from 500 down to 350, is that correct?
Yeah, in terms of...
So, and that'll allow for the infill, I think we're talking about density now.
Yeah.
So, okay. Yeah.
So, and the recognition of that is across all the towns, and because it's a combined district plan, there's recognition that Marston will have even higher densities, Carterton more similar to us. So it's all a signal of providing for growth and further housing. So when you look at that pie graph, that's a pretty good positive.
Yeah, it is.
In terms of
Featherston.
In terms of the prospect of change coming towards the community.
Yeah.
But we heard very clearly from Greytown and Martinborough that that section density was very iffy for them with regards to the character and intensity of the town. So a broad district plan change may be positive for Featherston and the feedback, but not for the other two. How do we resolve that?
My understanding was that Martinborough and Greytown were remaining relatively the same.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so it's not a broad brush, it's a...
No, okay.
Cool.
Yeah, different approach in different towns
No,
and
that
different districts can.
Yeah, cool. No, that's good. Thanks.
And I think that came about because it was mooted for Martinborough, especially to go down to the 120 size, and
It was
that was
pushed back. On the one block radius around the CBD limit.
Yeah. And that feedback has been discussed through the district plan. It's been through to that discussion.
Cool.
So yeah, there was relatively quite a lot of support, I think, for increasing density, mainly to provide choice. I think that's what it came down to. There was a lot of mention of people moved here for the lifestyle, and that was still wanting to be retained. And there could still be those options. Not everyone's going to subdivide. and there will be choices within town in different areas, and that's why we did present different zones, so that's the median, general and outer res, but within those blocks in town, it doesn't mean everyone has to go to that size.
But you still hold quite a bit of control over the shape and eventual format of that cutting down to 200 square metres. I mean, the feedback I've had from Featherston residents, they don't want to see a slum. They don't want to see a precinct development. So
you'd still have your standard like district plan requirements, like the setbacks and your height to boundary, all of that would be worked out. And then we also asked a question, which you'll see later on, about design guides and whether that was supported. So that's where you'll see a mixture of different designs. Yeah, it does link in very low density though. So,
and the other thing we've tried to factor in, as Kendall's alluded to it, is that we're providing for choice a mix of development types for the town, but also noting that Featherston is a growth node, and it's seen as a growth node because of the transit orientated basis of the Wellington Regional Growth Framework. So I think those things are slowly sinking into some residents in Featherston, or they're accepting of where their town is located.
As long as it's done well, I think that's the main point. As long as it's done well, people would support it. Which is So when we asked what don't you like, infrastructure capacity was number one. So we heard throughout all our drop-ins and surveys about what infrastructure issues there currently are in Featherston and what needs upgrading, sort of short-term, long-term, and they were concerned that increased density would have an impact on the system. So that's why we are, I think part of those we explained that this is to future-proof infrastructure. You need to understand what the future plan is, and that these things are staged. So that and there are some short-term things that we did hear from people that could be worked on. Some said that sections were too small, so there was 30 mentions of that, and again, it wasn't by a lot that people said that. They said maybe 300, 350 would be okay, but maybe 200 is a little bit small.
So they're currently too small, or they're proposed?
They're proposed, so 200.
So that's 30 out of 184 though, isn't it?
Again, bad housing outcomes could affect the character. That was needs to be done right. Worried that it wouldn't help the town centre, so worried that you bring more people in, but at the end of the day, it wouldn't improve the businesses
so
in
it's
town.
hand in hand planning.
And then lifestyle and gardens. We've heard a lot through people that people in Featherston love growing garden, and they didn't want to lose that. So then that links into reserves quite nicely. And we heard quite a lot, especially in our drop-ins and sessions, that community gardens would be something we would love to
just a misconception that people are going to be forced to subdivide their sections. I mean, they can still have a good garden. It's just they don't have to subdivide their house. Is it right? Where do you think that comes from?
Yeah, I think people thought that if you put the rule in, they'd be forced out. Maybe
no, we can't do that. We can't force people out of their houses and tell them what to do. That's stupid.
No, I'm just wondering about the misconception over what might...
That comes down to a comms at the end of the day, and reassuring people through comms.
Yeah, so people still have the individual rights. We're not that's not being taken away. So people will have to individually, or as a family, make that decision what they want with their property over 10 or 20 years.
You see that there's already plans available to subdivide in Greytown, and that hasn't been taken up for 5, 6, 7 years. They're still like their big lifestyle blocks.
So we heard from a lot of people that they would like to keep their site as it is, but weren't concerned with if there was development around them, that they just wanted to keep their site as it is. And we reassured them that there's no force for you to do that. It's just providing some options. Say if you did want to have an option for one of your children moving home or some extra money there. So
very good feedback.
I think the main issue is kind of like the flooding and mitigating the flooding and making sure the infrastructure is solid.
Brenda.
Yes.
Is that you, Brenda?
It is.
Sorry, we can't see you at the moment, so we weren't sure who was speaking. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Brenda.
Yeah, also I would like to say, if you look at option 2's overlay, and then you look at the last infrastructure need for where the worst part of our flooding and overflow into the sewage system is, the black area is exactly where your orange area is. And so how are you going to address the infrastructure issue if we are going to start having, say, 900 more housing built in here?
I think if you repeat that comment you just said before regarding the plan, then dictates the structural investment. Yeah.
We, on the original plan for the wastewater system that was withdrawn, there was a plan of where the worst part of the ingress for water that affects our wastewater system. If you overlay that on this plan, you will find that the orange area, which looks very dense, and because it's only, we can't see the full picture, we can only see, it would be really good if it would be possible to actually put it onto, rather than seeing all your slides in small, to have them fully onto our site so we can actually see the whole plan. Just down a screen, I think it's that one, yeah. We could have a look at that.
Is it up now?
No, all what we can see is your slides on one side and the little picture on the left. So the yeah. So the slideshow isn't showing.
Okay, it's showing on our end. Is it up now?
No.
Okay. Not sure why that is.
Still screen sharing?
Yeah.
No, it's not screen sharing. It's that it's the slideshow. I can see the screen, but the slideshow isn't working. So it's really small, so we can't see the legend. Okay. But if you overprint that's better, but it still looks like you need to put it onto slideshow.
Yeah, we've got it slideshow on our end, but for some reason it's just not coming through Zoom.
Okay. All right. So if we're looking at the medium density area and you overlay that on the ingress of the water on the to the right to where the wastewater system goes, it is totally black. In other words, that is really, really bad. And so what I'm saying is if we're going to make that more dense, we've got to fix that infrastructure before we even, we look at this. We've actually got to fix our infrastructure.
Yes, and that's part of the master plan. At this stage, these are high-level concepts. We're getting some flood modelling done and some infrastructure modelling done in more detail, and that will be brought through into our final master plan. And then again, when you implement a plan, you say you could release one area as that infrastructure is upgraded. It's not just opening up this master plan and releasing it within a certain time frame. It's over a 30-year period.
Okay, so just as a little follow-up, will the infrastructure for this be covered by the Three Waters costs?
Rainwater and
yes, it will. Assuming that Three Waters occurs, the entities will be responsible for stormwater, wastewater and drinking water. Therefore, will have full responsibility for the provision of the assets under the annual fee.
And remember that in terms of government reform, there's Three Waters reform that needs to land and the implementation aspects of that, and also RMA related spatial plan, regional spatial planning component. So it will encourage councils to look at their spatial planning work tied to infrastructure. So what we're doing is down that pathway, but we have further discussions that need to be had.
Russell, I've got a quick question. With regards to green space, have we come up with a formula for how much each town how much green space should be allocated to each town. Do we actually have a formula for that, or a way to calculate that out to ensure that there is enough green space for our spatial plans?
The impetus has come from, as I say, the Wellington Regional Growth Framework is one of the transit orientated development from Wellington through the heart, including Pairua, out up to Horowhenua, out through to Wairarapa. So when we're looking at placement, our high level options are anchored around 5 to 10 minutes walking distance from the train station, from linked to that transit orientated development. So it's been driven from that perspective. In terms of yield and the number of lots you'd get, they apply I think a 25% uptake figure as part of their house to land ratio in terms of dwellings. So that's a figure that the Wellington Regional Growth Framework has used in terms of some of their projections for around the different towns and metropolitan areas. And so that's as much as I can advise on that at that point.
Yeah. So that's kind of like a two-parter. How are we doing is the second parter. Do you have a comment to say there, James, or something?
I guess the question that I have from your councillor is, are you meaning on-site green space, or are we talking about public recreational space, just to clarify?
If we have a look to Greytown and their concerns around the lack of green space, what is the formula for the green space? So what is that formula, and how do we make sure that all our 3 towns have got thriving green space or availability to get to a piece of green space?
Yep. So there are national standards that apply, and I can't quote you on them, unfortunately. I think there was some. I'm fairly certain that both Ree and Richard will be over the top of them as to what they are. But there are national standards around walkability. Is one of those factors, my expectation will be that it will be included, and my recollection was there was discussion with Bryce about it as well before he left, so about what the needs were, particularly around playing fields, but
Fantastic, thank you.
Okay. That brings us on to the next slide, which was perfect timing for questions, discussions, any views on what we've just outlined.
Very interesting and very good work. Thanks, Kendall.
So we're happy that the proposed plan is also meeting the not very specific obligations of central government with regards to the way we're approaching freeing up residential land, and we're doing it in a much more considered way than some. Cool.
Yeah, we're ahead of some sort of larger medium councils.
It's very important to highlight that there is an imperative from government to look at this and do something about it. Yeah.
And then Alex, around the country, there's in terms of urban development capacity and implementation of that, obviously the metropolitan areas have to deliver more strongly on it. We 3 tiers, we didn't quite make the 3rd tier of it, but what we're effectively doing as a council is we're factoring in those needs and doing our spatial planning, which is now being encouraged.
Well, it's being mandated actually under the RMA or the Research Natural Environment Act that we have to do it. So we're well ahead of everyone doing this.
And at the depth of our work, you could say is in more detail than the likes of Masterton or Carterton.
Kendall, I'm really interested to know some of the conversations, obviously, that took place during your engagement to your community. And so how many innovative things came out of that you felt could be really exciting for our district and for our town in particular, wasn't it?
There was some really innovative and future thinking ideas. I think that was one of the main things we spoke about. So there was a range of things. I think one of the main ones was that connection between the train station and the town. I think we had great ideas where that could be an art trail or a sculpture trail or just something along that, so people would be encouraged to walk that, where people sometimes just go dry, or someone could come, they could direct it into town, into the main centre. There's a lot on that. One of the other big requests we had was for a community garden.
We tried those. It's interesting they came back, because we've tried those in the past and they haven't been successful. All right for the first few months, but then we have that interest drop off. But and that's when Featherston was sort of in that lower socioeconomic space as well. So there wasn't a high income level for people, and yet we thought it would be really encouraged, but it just didn't seem to fly. But maybe it's changed. Maybe there's
another example for Council Roles is activation around the train station, potential commercial around the train station.
Markets, a covered market was really, I think almost everyone mentioned a covered market, or a space that people could use in all weather. So whether that could just be a shelter somewhere and people could use that.
In the centre of town, or all around,
we had both had, whether that's at the train station or within the centre somewhere, or a container mall that people could go and set up and give something a go. I think
containers sort of came out of Christchurch because the mall was there, and there was a lot of discussion about that at the time, and certainly with that lemon land of ours in town that we don't own anymore, I might add. A container park in there probably would have been suitable at the time, but interesting.
Other topics were investigate the viability of a second commercial area around where the bookshops are, where the bookshop street, the side of the main street. Other thing, adding on to what Kendall mentioned, farmer markets and night markets. And there was a mixed views on if you want to activate the link between Main Street and the train station, do you go for some commercial, or do you use the space to tell the history of the town, for example, and as well as pedestrianisation? So,
any discussion around our current state of our buildings in the middle of town and how we move forward to? So I mean, it's always going to be a bugbear of mine, because it's been something that we've been battling with for.
Several people mentioned it.
I'm sure, because it really is holding us back in terms of our appearance. We're the gateway to the Wairarapa. We should have a really pretty. Warren poked up something the other day on Facebook about the number of paintings down the street of buildings painted, which is really what we could see as a vibrant community. But while we're restricted with derelict buildings, it's not doing anything to help us.
So on that, was there a note that we should, as it is council's responsibility to do something about that, or was there any flavour there that?
I would say there was a lot of asking us to help. I would say, is there anything we can do? And there was a few discussions that I've had in person as well, whether that is a regulatory approach or is there anything we can do to incentivise. So those were the two kind of discussions had. Or otherwise, could we do some paintings like murals or something in town that you can just brighten it up? Or encourage people to do that.
I've done that.
Sort of the main discussion, and that did feature throughout even all the survey questions.
And we did give context on it, like James took the opportunity to say, rather than regulatory, that's only one means. More of an encouraging and work with style. So there's that, plus examples where councils have tried to
accommodate
rates for a very inactive property owner, and they've got themselves in trouble before the courts, or they've been incurred legal costs and reputational impact.
It would be very unwise to use rating as an encouragement. Or
Christchurch City train.
That's using Bibles for that, not rating.
I thought they were increasing commercial, unoccupied commercial buildings.
Because rates need to be rated to cost.
They are.
Complex.
Right.
So hopefully that's given you some components that people have pushed back on or suggested?
Ree was going to do the vision, but unfortunately she's not here, so I can run you through. So as part of our foundation document and questionnaire, we put out a proposed vision. So that was sort of from the first feedback we got. And that came down to Featherston is to be a strong, caring community where there is a place for everyone. And so what I found in the survey is that most people agreed. So 121 people said that that was reflective of the community, but it wasn't as aspirational as what they'd like. It didn't represent sort of their uniqueness and the people who they really were and wanted something a little bit more. So there's some of the quotes there that I picked up when we were in our discussions about what they thought, were they related. We want living to be as good as it be. I think the one I really liked was, if there was an emergency, I'd want to be here, as we have a resilient community who pulls together when it's needed the most. I think when people sort of said that stuff to me, it was really, the roots were stuck. So yeah, I think yeah, a more aspirational vision probably does need to be produced. When we discussed that with Ree and the others, just pulling up some of those comments, we've revised one into an inclusive place of workers, families and creatives all supporting each other to be the best we can be.
Are you looking at a slide? Because all I'm seeing is slide number 8.
Yeah.
Ah, there we go. Thank you.
For some reason, sorry, it's not going up on the thing. I'll leave it like that and then we can all look at the same.
Yeah, so comments in the evening and in the library and even discussions with Feathy were, hey, we're a proud town of what we are. We're a town of workers. We are a resilient town. We've got resilient people who pitch in. And so absorbing all that, we've come up with another vision statement. Would you like to take us through?
Yeah, so an inclusive place of workers, families and creatives of all supporting each other to be the best we can be. So that was the revised one that we've sort of put as a, could it work? Is it aspirational enough?
What about looking at, instead of having the word place, have community, because that then involves all people within that area.
Yeah, I agree, Pam.
Yeah, it's something we can go out again on, I would say. But yeah.
And that the comments have been that they see themselves as adaptable sort of problem solvers and resilient. So, and creative, you know, a mixed group of people who are creative as well as resilient. So that's what we've come up with. And are there any other points that you're maybe not comfortable with in terms of what's being posed?
I think the demographics of Featherston have changed considerably over the years. So we've seen an influx of people now who are really creative, who want to be engaged in the community and not separate. They want to have a voice as well. I think it's really important that people in our community do like to speak their mind. Some people might not like hearing it, but so that creativity flows from things like Booktown. So and I think Warren would agree that we're probably seeing a lot more art in town now. You know, people,
and it's not just painting art; it's the sculptures.
Yeah, absolutely. So that brings a whole new dimension into the town, and it creates a really, really buzzy feeling. And we've just got to tap into that wisdom and knowledge and enhance it and bring it to the fore so that we've got that vibrancy back.
Yeah, vibrancy I think is another key word that I've heard throughout the meeting.
It is more vibrant than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Perhaps when you go back out with instead of just having one draft for vision statement, maybe have 2. So create one like that and then create one that has some of that vibrancy words in it and things like that to give people 2 options to look at, and you might find that you'll end up with one because people will look at combining the 2 to get the wording they want.
Yeah.
Just I don't know how I pitch this, but the couple of days I've just spent with Taituara and a whole lot of other councils, they used some really good examples from other councils, particularly on their long-term plans, and they had very short, snappy kind of, 3 to 5 words, kind of catchphrases that they put on their LTPs around their outcomes. And that to me was really memorable, crisp, you didn't forget it. That's long. And you might end up with maybe 3 words or 5 words, and then maybe something, an explainer underneath. Don't know. But that's just that short, snappy kind of, those were the things that the 3 ones that they had up on the stage all had like 3 to 5 word kind of catchphrases. I mean, that was for LTPs, which is slightly different. But they were talking about outcomes for the communities.
So something like thriving communities that support.
Yeah. I like the best. I don't know. That's just me.
Well, you all want to be the best.
Yeah, that gives us something to work with. Okay, so that takes us to the more detailed, so that's the bigger stuff out of the way, the options and the vision. Now we'll go on to the themes that emerged, and then I'll get into the actual questions and what we got from those.
Sorry, I jumped the gun a little bit before, sorry about that.
That's all right.
I was really keen to know what things
now we have to zoom back out. So yeah, number one, I think it was in every submission, was people love the community, they love Featherston, they want a better Featherston for everyone, not just themselves, which I think is very cool for the community. And they want that, again, to look out for the elderly, the kids as a whole. So I think that came through, and that's why that's being put as number one, that everyone's responses were shaped around that one point. The next one is town centre, which would be the most mentioned, and followed, that was mainly around vibrancy was the word used, revitalisation, redevelopment, and greater business opportunities. There were sort of 3 categories within that itself, was the physical appearance of town. If we couldn't get businesses in, then can we make it appear better at least? The next one was that we needed businesses. We heard that it was essentials, some specialty shops, where people wanted the basics and thought that Featherston did the basics well. And we heard through people in our drop-in sessions and through the responses that there are people and businesses wanting to set up in Featherston, but either they can't get in a space, or if there is a space that isn't available, like they can't access it, or it isn't suitable for them, for that business. So we heard a range.
That was an example of one lady on the, I think the second night, saying she had heard 5 examples of where new activity could have come in, but location or whatever didn't make it happen. So there's that interest out there, which is hard.
So derelict rundown buildings do not help out.
No.
But to what extent, ignoring
I
3 buildings, what is the extent of our involvement? Is this increasing the amount of commercial land available to react, or is this just a comment that we actually have very little control over?
It could be zoning. Well, that's where in those options we've looked at town centre zoning and then mixed use. Maybe mixed use could provide more options, bring more people into the town centre. So instead of shops, you could have, shops on the bottom, more people living up top, and it becomes more vibrant through that. Or people actually being there, or it could be putting some shops near the station or something along those lines. We also, in my discussions we had, I raised the question, do we need any industrial activities? And there was I've got a question on that later, some mixed responses on that, whether if we did, what were they? So I heard from a few companies, small scale industry, tradies, could like a workshop somewhere, panel beaters, mechanics, those sort of things that currently can't fit in the main street because there isn't that flexibility for them, but where do they go? The other industrial places like Birdwood, they're too large. So where do they fit? That came up a bit. So is there an option for light industrial, or would they fit into mixed use? So that's where we have that option to discuss and influence. Yeah.
Well, I think that's an important discussion to have, and the whole flavour of all the infrastructure we're looking at.
Well, was there any discussion around industry as such, and the fact that we've got a rail siding and so transport links between other centres is paramount? I mean, obviously it's there. Was there any discussion around industry, manufacturing?
Yeah, there was. I asked the last question, it's in here,
Okay.
I'll get to it then, but I can give it somewhere else. It was, there was, yeah, Birdwood was probably Birdwood Street that was raised the most, and it was split. It was, do we ever use it for industry like that? Some people in Featherston thought we didn't need any more big, larger scale industry, and suggested maybe could that be used for residential, high density residential.
Okay.
So there was that split. I think when we asked people, like, is there the demand there? Do we want that in our town, or is it best to focus on other things?
So
I'm not actually sure that land's actually suitable for housing because all the industry that's been on it before, it's quite contaminated.
Yeah, that would be something we need to look at. I'm not sure. It does
Anyhow, no, it's
But it's a good topic example of trade-offs. Which way do you go?
Yeah,
And also check out the nature of the land.
yeah, I agree.
Because it's interesting to note that Skellerup are going from that area, so they're moving what used to be Stevensville, right? So that's going down to Christchurch. They're in the process of doing that now. So
All jobs lost in our town.
well, actually,
There wasn't.
But we've heard that there's demand to come back in smaller, more bespoke commercial industrial. So
yeah, and I
It's
think
quite
it's an opportunity to develop or to talk to the people that own those physical buildings, to develop that, to maybe have your arts people working together and doing things, you know, in those particular areas, which then don't need a plan change or anything for them to be able to set up and those businesses.
I just think that we need to start looking at how we're going to create jobs for the next generation that comes through. You know, whether they all going to have to leave the area. You know, I'd like to see a little bit of industry, a little bit of manufacturing.
Well, that did come up quite a bit with people saying, when we asked the question, do you think we need any industrial land? People said that they would like to see some industrial so that it supports the commercial businesses.
Yes.
And that people, like, it's fine, maybe fine now when people are commuting, but you know, if people don't want to commute anymore and want to work locally, can they work in Featherston?
Yeah, for sure. They used to. It was a thriving community.
So at what stage do we actually look at the industrial side? Because we've completely ignored it and just gone full out hog on for residential.
That's part of this process. Part of the master plan is to look at industrial as well. So in those options, we've still got industrial by at Birdwood. It hasn't changed. That would still, in those options, that would still stay there.
Some zone that way. Yeah.
I think that goes for all three, isn't it? We've still got to do that discussion and have that conversation with those people that want to do light industrial or industrial, whatever you like to do.
Yeah, not very good.
I know that was a big issue with Martinborough.
Yeah. So that will definitely, that commercial mixed use and industrial mix, I think, is something we need to work on and find some more information about.
initially we were going to do a second stage spatial plan to include commercial, industrial and rural, but we've obviously merged that into this process now.
Yeah, well, the rationalisation of industrial land, for example, was being captured under the district plan review, Wainawa, and commercial, in the commercial sense, town centres areas, town centre zones, rather than calling them commercial. So that's under the district plan, which will be captured when we see the draft after the election.
But we're going to try and have the three towns have that discussion around those areas so that that could feed into the master, to the combined district plan, so that we didn't actually, if they wanted to change the zoning in some of those places, it was done at that time rather than an additional cost later on. And I think from the towns, that's a discussion really crucial going forward for each of our 3 towns, because that's the area that's lacking. Featherston would have more than any of the other 2. So I think, you know, that was to be a main part, because that's what started this ball rolling from Martin's point of view, was because we didn't have any of that set aside, and that land needed to be.
Yeah,
Yeah, we've got a railway station.
yeah, I think the main change is
You've got a tracking
Oh, yeah, we've got a railway station.
I think the main change, as Russell said, is industrial land isn't, under the new plan, won't be industrial land as such. Industrial land will be Wainawa, but for maybe our small towns, mixed use may capture those things. So that could cover your trade workshops and your smaller light industrial in there.
Things like that.
Yeah, so there is just a slight change in some of the zonings. Was that somebody wanting to come in? No.
I think some clarification, Pam, is that the spatial plan didn't direct staff to do master plans for all 3 towns. The master plan was specifically for Featherston. Therefore, the more holistic kind of target of how a town will look and feel, and allocation of activities is not what's been proposed or funded for Martinborough or Greytown at this stage, and really only focusing on managing parts of the area that's looking for residential growth. In terms of the DP, the work that we've done a bit of rationalisation around what goes where. We haven't, because we haven't got any support, either policy support or analysis that's robust enough to look at or identify any additional areas at this stage. So that's probably what the answer you need, Pam.
James, I think that there was always going to be a master plan for the other 2 areas. It was just that because Featherston was on the growth growth path from Wellington, that it was decided to do Featherston first, but there was always the option to do, yes, right.
That's not reflected in the spatial plan, Pam, but basically it deals with the MF in particular. MA needs some structural work, and maybe some structure work in the growth areas only. The spatial plan's quite particular about that and the differences between the master planning for each of those areas.
Yeah, but we are going to do a master plan for Greytown and Martinborough.
Not only the areas that were specified. So for Martinborough, that was MF, with some infrastructure, spatial structure planning for MA, not for the town itself.
Okay, can we review that? This is Featherston at the moment, but we just need to iron out some misconceptions there just to make sure we're on the same page, okay?
Yeah, let's get our focus back on Featherston.
Okay. So after commercial brand, the other sort of sub point was urban form and connections through town were a concern, and that people would like to see some better connections between the main street. So that was then train station, that link, but others were the main street through to the community centre, medical centre was one.
Yep, that's good.
The others were Clifford Square was making that safer and more pedestrianised and connecting, connecting the park a little bit more and more connected to town.
That's part of the Clifford Square development plan. There's a plan actually
attached to that.
Yeah, so that's never been completed because of various factors. But the Clifford Square management plan incorporated Fox Street across that, and also Cherry Blossom Park. So that was all part of the global plan when the town's square was built.
Yeah.
What was there any discussion regarding the cutting off of the additional access to State Highway 2 between the, so what was the flavour of that?
Yeah, that was mentioned quite a few times, and that it was, they wanted, whether it be side street, whether either of those two that joined on to the state highway, they wanted one of those shut to provide better safety.
Absolutely.
We heard from a few families that they didn't feel safe for their children to go play at the park or the skate park, or people, because people hoomed across, and even being there when I was at the library, they said, have a look out there, and I did, and when I left, I saw a kid trying to cross the road, and that was pretty scary.
And also the through traffic is actually a danger on State Highway 2, because they are able to carry through. Could we raise that with the NZTA, because that's their baby? any change on state highway to access or whatever falls within the remit of we will allow that or not. So
we had pushback from the fire service when that was mooted some years ago.
Quite a few years ago.
Well, we haven't had a
conversation. Do you remember when we were talking about Underhill Road?
Yeah.
And it was initially raised by fire Fins that was an issue, and all of a sudden it disappeared as an issue. So I'd be really interested to revisit that.
Good point. I'd love to see some work done.
Yeah, I think I've got it in one of the other slides, but I think it had just in that online surveys about 14 specific mentions.
And that's a lot for a specific issue.
The third topic was infrastructure. All the existing infrastructure problems were at front of mind, and that came up when there was increasing density. That was what people were concerned about, specifically stormwater, footpaths, lighting, traffic coming on the main road, and there was a lot of mention of power outages and I should say internet coverage being a concern, especially with people working from home, and then future concerns of water security and wastewater came up quite a bit.
We finished off, the government finished off fibre rollout through Featherston. I'm really surprised that I can see internet as being a problem in some of the rural areas, but not the big towns anymore.
Still somewhat, I think it's the edges of town. It doesn't extend the whole town. Even if the people that were residential didn't get it. I think
that's something to bring up possibly for a council discussion with Spark or whatever to see if they need to put boosters in. If they've already got fibre, they shouldn't be.
Power's a real problem at the moment. I think. Just the power company. Okay, I'm very keen on obviously looking at there's not enough power in Featherston for our future development, to be quite honest. I mean, if you turn the heaters on the NZ core, you just be able to suck every bit of power out of every home in Featherston. So that's our core the transmission network is. So that and Transpower are aware of that, and obviously they're working to improve it. So,
and they are one of our stakeholders that we are. Cool. Another one, housing options and choice. Again, we've discussed that. General support for increased density, social housing is needed, and that there is options for affordable homes, rentals, options for everyone, I think people mentioned. Better connections, again, with raised town, but this is another big point that came through. And the value of reserves and parks, especially with increasing density, that people wanted to see them used better and linked in a lot better, again, connections. So they all really, a lot of the feedback we got related to one another. So then I'll go through relatively quickly our general responses to the questions themselves. So we asked, tell us how you'd like to see greater Māori presence in the future design of Featherston Township. There was a lot of support of the PO that's being established. I think people liked that. But we were asked to speak with Paitamoka directly, and people wanted them to be included. But outside of that, that was 51 mentions, that was the main response. But outside of that, people had support for bilingual signage, some art and design throughout town, requests for a place of learning. Again, that came up, whether that's just one place where people can meet, youth, something like along those lines, and connecting town with the Moana was another one.
So you'd love that, Brian?
All of it. Yeah. All of it.
So
the question, so you're looking at Paitamoka, and it's probably just an informational from my perspective. To what extent is Paitamoka resourced or able to be the go-to person on consultation, or is Kohonui Marae more aligned to the Hapu Mana Whenua consultation? I'd love some clarity.
Yeah, well, just one singular perspective, I would go to that. I would go to Kohonui.
Yeah.
Paitamoka was formed as a voice of Māori standing.
Yeah.
And really that's that role of Kohonui, I believe, and Pāpāwai to a certain extent, but Kohonui would be my first go-to around all things Dao Māori. Yeah, the point of difference being that Paitamoka was formed to be a voice for Featherston, for Māori living in Featherston, on the Māori Stand Committee, in just that role.
Yeah. Mana Whenua is out of Kohonui.
Yeah, although Karen McHarry,
but she's both.
Yeah, she's got. So,
cool.
And that's the thing, you know, you get those crossovers. But I would personally go to Koromui and great for developing relationships.
So that connection, I have to say, I know probably over the last 5 years, that connection between local and Featherston community has grown considerably. And we've got a lot of people now who are learning Te Reo Maori, you know, simply because they have the interest in the culture. And we've got we've got Paetumogo there, which we didn't have previously. So we never had that representation of Maori standing.
And what's your resourcing in Paetumogo to say Kopanui and Paetumogo were consultative? Have you got the resourcing within your organisation to actually respond?
Oh, you can always have more resources.
So you talk about money.
I mean, it's
No, I'm talking about members and staff and knowledge.
It's supply and demand, like Colin says, the hunger is there, the desire is there. I tried running the te reo classes every Sunday afternoon. Mind you, COVID dynamics really played a huge impact, but you know, yeah, eventually it's that kind of the wearing out of volunteer time, and you know, you get that kind of volunteer exhaustion.
Gets thrashed.
Yeah.
Trust me on that.
But I mean, I'm really optimistic. You know, I think it's just a matter of just more cohesive.
Let's have another side conversation about that from a council perspective. Because I think we need you there.
Yeah.
As an early warning or a first port of call and then a connection.
Your name actually did come up in a few of these surveys as well. I suggested talking to you.
Every single conversation I've mentioned.
I'll just have to zoom out slightly. We asked, what additional community and social infrastructure do you think Featherston needs? A lot of it came down to they thought they had the social infrastructure and community infrastructure there. It was just they needed more support, or we needed better connections or better Main Street appearance to really make that community and social infrastructure stronger. That was probably the main theme, but yeah, some more suggestions: community garden, local gym upgrade, traffic calming, yeah, closing Clifford Square in there, a bit of use of reserve. So you can see there's sort of general themes throughout.
Very good stuff there.
Was there anything on an aged care facility in there?
There wasn't specifically, but I did speak to a lot of people that said there's, yeah.
There is a
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they sort of signaled that.
Yeah. When asked, should we have design guides? So that links to doing higher density well, making sure you get the outcomes you're wanting. We had 60, I have it on here, 60 something percent wanted design guides. Those who didn't support it, they thought the outcomes would be similar to what you see in cities where everything is copy and paste, and they wanted a bit of character.
Yeah, interesting. I agree.
So they didn't want to restrict people with what they could do in their own sites. Yeah. So there was some mixed thoughts on that.
So that's up to us to make the design guides allow for originality, and the guide and originality don't necessarily go together, but there are lots of options for them. Yeah.
We asked, should a heritage area study be carried out? So that would look at if there's any heritage protection in certain areas. But there are buildings in certain areas that are protected, but whether there's an overall character in some way.
We know of those buildings though, don't we? So what was the response saying yes?
It was yes. Those who said no and don't know, it was that we knew what buildings they were, and people preferred to protect the building rather than the area.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. That there wasn't particularly an area as such. It was those buildings that made up the area. That makes sense. Yeah.
Fair enough.
And this was the industrial land one here. When we asked, do you think we need more? The main response was no, we don't know. And what that actually came down to was that people didn't think we needed actually any more industrial land. They just thought the land that was there should just be used better.
Yeah.
So
and it's probably a fair call if you drive past it and see an active business.
Yeah. So instead of moving it somewhere else and opening more land, they thought that.
It's a very low response rate though. There's not, out of 184, you're talking 15, 10, 4, 4.
That was, so that most people did answer it, but it was a yes or no, and then there was, if you think yes, what are your,
Okay.
tell us.
If you look at the yes and the don't knows, that's far greater than the no's. So I think that, yeah, that's what I would do.
That's
Always smart in that way.
That's very smart.
Yeah.
I think that's.
It's something that I'm really quite passionate about. I'd certainly, in terms of industry and job creation, and they're key drivers in any community to give it strength, because that feeds that industry, that commercial activity feeds into the community in the way of sports and leisure and recreation.
There's a guide there to say, actually, you've got enough, but you should allow them to subdivide it down.
Well, yeah,
that's what that's telling me. Or the nature of it needs to be different.
Yeah.
Or maybe a different location than where it is.
Well, that's right, and I think there's some opportunities there as well.
Also, it's in as much as people generally don't want a house on a railway line. So therefore it's sort of spoiled for residential.
Yeah, but that connection between industrial and the railways, a service centre, for instance, is important. So maybe
very useful. Very useful.
But you have that green space either side of the railway line, which you can have walking areas or
dog parks.
Dog parks, but nice people where people can actually stop, they can have their lunch or whatever. But that corridor up the railway line is actually quite nice.
Yeah, there's some really good information tucked in. Yeah, at this stage I've gone through at a higher level, but yeah, I think that all this, when you go through it in a lot of detail, it's some really good information there that will help form the Featherston Masterplan option that we come out with. So that comes back to you now, Russell.
Right.
Yeah.
You've got 5 minutes.
So, next steps. So we've done the engagement. We've had a high level of interest. We've had high ideas, medium ideas, identification of constraints. We have to get a signal from you as councillors, or a reflection from you in terms of endorsement for
one of the options.
Development around, the state of play around the existing train station and Main Street is the impetus that's come up through the feedback.
Sorry, Russell.
Is
this going to be presented to council? Because we can't make a decision here.
Thank you, Brenda.
But the impetus we've got is to do finer grain work, which we need to do in terms of bringing something back to councillors.
Yep.
I think the indication is very clear from the public as the direction.
Absolutely, I mean, you can't question that.
And I think if we went against what we saw as the majority would be a very unusual council on this topic.
So you want some sort of guidance today on which one you should really focus on to bring to council and to bring to a new council as well. Is that correct? Is that what I'm hearing, Russell?
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, the community have spoken, in my view. They've told us what they would expect and what they want us to work on.
So our direction would be to listen to the
community, the voice of the community.
Follow the majority decisions that we've seen in the consultation. I'm happy that the consultation has been robust, at 180 something, and the list of the different range that you've approached. Good comment.
Yeah.
So, what do you guys think?
I'm the same view. I think we with this direction given.
You don't need direction from us.
No, we just endorse what our community are telling us. And, would you agree with that, Brenda?
I would agree, but I'm not agreeing for a direction forward for Russell. I'll wait until we come to council for that. Thanks.
It's not a direction, really. It's just a guide, I guess, and the community's given that guide. Yeah, and we can discuss that at council. A reflection. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
An acknowledgement or a reflection.
Yeah. So don't waste your time on any other things other than what our community really want.
Yeah.
How's that?
Thank you for that. So officer level, we've got to do a design charrette. We did a design charrette, which is layout thinking, we did our first one, which produced the 2 high-level options. We've got to have another design charrette with central government agencies. When is that happening? That's in October of this year. So that will take place. We've got the Wellington Regional Leadership Forum, which I sit in on, and remember that Featherston is one of the 7 CDOs, the complex development opportunities across the Wellington region for focus. So I'm attending those as well, where I have to speak and give update on that, plus also be present so that any notions of further discussions with agencies rolls out, and any ideas on funding rolls out. Ree will also attend those with me as we shape forward our thinking. So I'm just signalling next steps. So there's that regional stuff happening. Ree and Richard will do some drawing and mapping refinement work, which we need to do with officers. Ree has mentioned here two detailed design options developed to be agreed with the council. So we will serve our refinement work back to council in September. We've got to undertake consideration of high-level design plus the public realm as well as the housing. We've got to do this is where Ree will be working with Richard, a quantity survey, look at costings and relative feasibility in terms of housing placement, for example. And then we're working towards the draft master plan being prepared and taken back to council in November.
So the draft will go out for consultation early in the new year?
Before the new year.
I think it was December we were taking it to the council, and it would be out in the
and across early in the new year. Yeah. So that's great. Yeah. That's fantastic. Yeah.
It's in the formal consultation.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm just what plans do you have to brief an incoming council, and particularly Featherston Ward councillors and community board members? Have you got plans to specifically target that group as part of the induction?
That will be a key topic for them as part of that, which we will have to cover off. There's also, as part of slightly to the side, ELT's thinking of how do we do a good induction. We want to get out of the office and go around and show existing councillors, new councillors, what the issues of the year are, and whether it's growth areas, whether it's infrastructure. So there's that opportunity as well to tell the story.
That's great.
Just in the last 2 days that I've been at Kaitoara, one of the big things that they said is don't overwhelm your new space it out.
It's going to happen anyhow. It's going to happen anyhow.
You can only absorb so much, especially if you've got
absolutely. And they talked a lot about along the way. So having good conversations throughout the period and along the way. One of the really good ideas that I liked, I don't know how much value it would add, would be to give a summer reading pack to all the new elected members, and this could be part of that summer reading pack. So, give some background reading over the Christmas period.
I think this is so important. The Featherston Masterplan, Featherston's obviously a great node as part of the regional framework, but this is the once in a life opportunity for most people who are going to be elected or around the table now. And I just think it has to be done really well, because we want the best for Featherston. We know that it's always going to be the best town in the world, but we want the best. So.
And therein lies the challenge.
It does, until we can get rid of some derelict buildings, so we're going to be struggling.
I think that we've got a really complex training ahead of us. We've got massive reform, Three Waters reform, RMA reform, future of local government, climate change. There's a whole lot of stuff around health reform as well, tipping into local government. I spoke to one council that is providing a medical centre for their community because the medical centre has fallen over. And it's just really interesting to see what's happening in the health space as well.
Amanda,
yeah,
you need to take a before and after photo. Before the training and then after. These guys are going to be absolutely inundated.
I think we've got the photo that we took of you guys on your like your first. Like,
I wasn't there, so I don't even look any different yet.
But yeah, it's going to be a really jam-packed training. Quite a lot of big issues, and trying to keep focused on the things you can do that will make a difference. I think it's going to be the trick. What are the levers you've got?
Cool. No, that's fantastic.
And Councillor Old's comment there, so as well as compiling the draft master plan, there's feedback to councillors in the community workshops as the work's being done, which you've just identified as new councillors coming in. And then last mission, or the key mission, is the draft master plan going out in December.
Excellent.
22, which Kendall.
And that's what for consultation. For engagements, right?
Formal consultation.
Yeah, that's formal process. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's going to be what, 3 to 4 month process, or is that before we come to council for?
Come to council in February. Is that the goal?
It'll be
March.
No, it'll be more likely March, and then
There's a whole
receiving the feedback from the draft, doing review and amendments. And with the aim of having the final document, April.
Makes sense.
There's a whole lot of things like how often you meet, when do you meet, meeting dates that we need to resolve after the election as well, which will play into that.
Gosh, your officers are going to be very busy.
Is mindful of consultation, what do you call it, exhaustion?
Fatigue.
Not only for councillors, but the community.
The community is a real issue because you've got the regional council, NZTA, Kiwi Rail, all playing in the space.
Whoever else. So one of the things that I'm really keen to do is to use the work that the planning team have done, not lose it. Like one of the things that's happened in the past, I think, and this is what I see on Facebook, is that good ideas get raised up and feedback gets gathered, and then it just dissipates somewhere. So we really want to. I've got my team working on a store, a folder, a file where we can start to hold that feedback loop, so that when we go out, we can say, when we've over the last 2 years that we've been speaking to you, you've said this, and this. Are these the things that are still? What's the top one? We can have a much more well-informed conversation than going starting from scratch every time, which is what we tend to do.
It's a really good holistic look, Amanda. Yeah, fantastic.
Thank you.
So one of the things I've always worried about LTPs and APs is, is a progress report on how we're progressing with a lot of stuff. And it filters through from time to time, but it's not condensed. I mean, and I think that would be really worthwhile. Do we achieve these outcomes in the LTP?
What progress have we made?
Just once a year.
I would have thought, thinking through the different committees, you would get a view, but it's not a compiled.
Well, no, you're not on every committee, are you? So you're not getting that.
But the other thing is the public doesn't get that, unless they go to all the meetings and read all the minutes. And that storytelling element is really critical.
And we started seeing that with the green, the traffic light system. Are we on track? Are we falling behind? Sort of thing, which is really useful. Finance.
We got a meeting tonight.
Yeah.
Can I just ask, sorry, can I just ask, kia ora, just as a little aside, I know that we're doing a big plan and it sounds really exciting. When are you expecting for this plan to be put into action? And how is it going to fit in with, say, Three Waters, which is about 5 years away or 4 years away? So how are we going to be able to fit in this if we want to get our plan going and we're going to be a growth node? What is the time frame that we're looking at implementing the start of this?
So that time will be from April next year onwards, and with the development of the final plan, there will be some implementation components or an implementation one-page plan, for example, which we would have to share with councillors and community board members. So that's that component that will be developed. As we develop the final, we should be thinking of the implementation component. And that's probably as best as I can answer on it at this stage, Claire.
Yeah, I guess my concern is how often, I mean, how long do we put off infrastructure because we're expecting possibly somebody else to pay for it or a different body to pay for it? And how is that going to be able to restrict our ability to put this plan into action? Because every single council will want to have their infrastructure looked at as well.
Can I give an update, Russell, on that part? That
would be great. Thank you.
Can I just be excused? I have to
go
to another appointment.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you.
I'll see you tonight. Yeah. Or somebody is tonight.
See you tonight.
Yeah. So there's a number of aspects around implementation. Keeping in mind that this is a 30-year plan and everything might not be appropriate to bring on immediately. In terms of when the rubber meets the road for the rezoning side of things, and there's going to be a whole lot of non-statutory stuff that will come out that won't require a plan change to move forward with. Look, there's a few things that we need to filter before we can have any certainty. A lot of that relates to infrastructure, what we can bring on and when, what will help us in terms of the wider aspect of reforms is that the reforms coming forward without trying to muddy the waters too much, in particular around resource management. The existing spatial plans and growth plans will be first cab off the rank when they're integrated into the new planning regime. The fact that we're doing this work now is quite critical in terms of getting priority. Similarly, there are things that are non-infrastructure related that will require council, or the public, or somebody to fund as well, regardless of whatever happens. So while there's not a straight line, further analysis needs to be made once we get a strategic overview of what the community wants to achieve about rolling that out. Certainly we're in a good position to get priority to achieve that at this stage.
Thank you. Thank you, that was great.
So I've just got a quick question. Are we keeping Maori Standing Board involved and just giving them a one-liner or a quick?
Work has been through Pautumokai, early engagement. So, but I can note that, Brenda.
Yeah, that'd be really good. Appreciate it. Yeah.
So I think I checked in with Ree on that as well, and my understanding is that she had been to not just Pautumokai, but also to
Māori Standing Committee.
She has been to Māori Standing Committee, hasn't she? Yeah.
I don't think she formally went to Māori Standing Committee. I think we've had discussions
Offline
outside.
conversations.
I think they said they'd rather direct people to speak to that.
Yeah.
It's just making sure we've all got our ducks in a row and the right people, and that everyone that needs to be involved is involved. It's a fairly big project.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that. And on that note, we'll close off.
Awesome.
Thanks for attending, comment, and for the listening.
Just very quickly, sorry, my mute was on. When we talk about Paitamokai, are we talking about Paitamokai o Tauira, which is the raranga that's set up within Featherston?
Yes.
Or are we talking about South Featherston School, or who in Paitamokai are we talking about?
We're talking about the group. Sorry, you go, Brenda.
It's the Paitamokai o Terea, however you pronounce it. It's are you in that group, Warren?
I'm still a member. I've just stepped back off the committee. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So the committee that Warren's on.
Kia ora.
Thanks everyone. See you later.
Yeah, ka kite.
See you.
Well, thank you all for that very wonderful meeting. Thank you for the invite. I don't know where I do my dishes. I feel like I need to do dishes.
Thanks, Warren.
Are you going to have a karakia to